Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
Every part of comics and artwork is a form of communication with other people. It's not just here, let me direct my thoughts at you as a dictation of concept, but it's hoping to convince you of how cool you think a visual could be or a story could be. And you're trying to communicate ideas in one part storytelling and greater part just graphic impact. You're hoping to relate a sense of energy, urgency, and enthusiasm to people. That there's a lightning of spirit that comes out of superheroes that has always worked for me. That it isn't really about the practicality of what they might do. It's not the practicality about grown men punching each other in costumes. It really isn't about that. It's a visual metaphor. And that metaphor could be for a lot of things, but it's mostly just about the energy and enthusiasm that can be found in the fun of life.
Welcome back, everybody. It's time again for another Word Balloon Live, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Long time coming, Justin Gray. I'm glad we got to finally meet face-to-face at Terrificon a couple months ago. And as promised, welcome to Word Balloon.
Thanks for having me. It's great to finally be here.
It's
all years.
Long-time pleasure. I've been meaning to do this for a really long time. I've been a fan for a really long time of your collaborations with Jimmy Palmiotti over the years, and we'll certainly talk about that stuff.
Sure.
But as your backdrop suggests, we're here to talk about your new Kickstarter campaign for your ongoing series, Standstill.
Yes.
For newbies, give us the 10-cent elevator pitch on Standstill.
I had this concept quite a few years back. In fact, I didn't realize until recently how far back it went because I had done an interview for USA Today in 2012 where I was talking about the retrovirus book that Jimmy and I were doing and the fact that I had H1N1 on top of that. So at one point, somewhere in between then and now, I came up with this concept of how terrifying it would be if we were all subject to a paralysis. The majority of the human race was suddenly stuck within their own bodies, couldn't move, and were slowly, either starving to death or events around them, the environment was affecting them. And then I wanted to see what would happen with the people that survived, because part of the exploration of it was to look at all the things you don't normally see in apocalyptic type movies or shows or whatever, whereby which you have real problems that would exist almost within a week. Besides the power going out, things like nuclear power plants would become a serious issue globally in a very short period of time if we didn't have people there taking care of them and making sure they're running properly. So those are some of the ideas. The heavy weather and some of the climate things that we're dealing with now seemed ultimately more interesting on a human level to me for people to struggle with. And then as we start to see in these later issues, there's other elements that the survivors are having to deal with.
Gotcha. Understood. You are doing, I want to make sure that I'm running still. All right, good deal. I saw myself freeze for a second. I don't know if it froze by you.
No, you're good.
Okay, good. Issues 7 and 8 are part of this Kickstarter campaign. As we're recording, 10 days to go in the campaign as well. You've met your goal, but obviously we want to see you get your stretch goals.
Yeah, well, everything, this book is the book that everything goes back into it. We just continue because it's an ongoing thing. We do 2 issues at a time. Branko, the artist, is constantly working on it. So basically anything we overfund is just making sure that Branko keeps going. And, he's covered and secure and locked into doing the book at his own pace, which is pretty quick anyway. So, and it's gorgeous. So
Yeah, no, it sure is. I mean, these are alternate. This is an alternate cover that I just threw up. This one.
Right, that's a Rui Silveira. I'm working with him right now. Primarily, I'm working with Branko and Rui. We're doing that's another book that we can talk about later. So these guys are just kind of really great to work with. We really have great synergy, and these two books that we're working on now are just so much fun, and then probably putting more effort into this than I even realize until after a few issues start coming out.
That's cool, and I'm sure people are wondering, because you're part of Paper Films with Jimmy and Amanda and everybody over there. We did a Paper Films panel at Terrificon as well.
Right.
I mean, just again, I mean, I know you and Jimmy on your own are strong enough writers and stuff. Is it just you both want to kind of do your own projects right now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things. Jimmy has been working with Amanda now for some time. Obviously, they were doing Harlequin, and they've been doing other projects. And Jimmy's been doing some DC projects. And I wanted to sort of get the ball rolling on some independent projects, just some things. And it's not just the writing element of it, because I'm fully immersed in everything. I letter under a pseudonym. I do the graphic design. I do the coloring on the covers for Standstill. I do art direction on almost everything. Art. I won't say direction, but definitely collaboration and suggestion. And I do pre and post production before press. A lot of things that I had never had the opportunity to do before, and things that I have grown to really love, and I feel have improved my my writing and my understanding of the medium in ways that I just sort of didn't really comprehend before.
Understood. And hey man, you've got your stuff that you did at DC and Marvel, and that's great. That's always a great base.
Yeah.
These days, the formula is, man, make your name there and then take your audience with you. And I'm glad that Standstill has been doing well enough that you're at issues 7 and 8. Do you see this as a finite series? I mean, how do you see this progressing?
I have there's a couple of different ways I can go with it. Ultimately, it feels like one of those things that maybe the world is changing to a point where it can't go back to the way it was before. So it'll have to be a new version of the world that as we understand it, post Standstill. So, on the one hand, it could have an ending or it could continue, but there's going to be a satisfying point in which it ends at some point. I'm not sure when that is, because I have a lot of storytelling. I have a specific methodology to telling this story, because I want to kind of counterbalance realism with science fiction elements and horror elements. And to balance those two together has been an exciting challenge, because I don't want it to just be, certainly there's an opportunity for it to be all action and all talking heads. And I'm trying to figure out a way to really drive character stuff while not making it boring for anyone. I know a lot of times that there's a gravitation toward falling in love with one's dialogue. I feel like that's been a thing since Tarantino. There's just been this sort of rhythmic thing where people have had that trend, and I'm not as much interested in that. I am interested in catchy, snappy dialogue, but not so much for the sake of dialogue being the entertainment itself. So that's been a real fun challenge.
Understood. And people can catch up. I mean, one of the great tiers that you're offering is to get, I mean, again, this specifically is for issues 7 and 8, but if you want to get 1 through 8, there's, a very reasonable way to do it digitally, and also the physical books as well.
Yep. And I have a trade of the first 6. I'm looking at them like episodes, because I don't want to be doing a Kickstarter for 13, 14. So I'd rather do it in a sense that this is season 1. Not so much in the television format, but just in a structural way that it makes it easier for everyone to jump on board.
Sure.
And I try to make their significant 6-issue arc elements to it, as well as having pretty dramatic beats in between.
Sure. And Jimmy Broxton did the first arc here?
He did the first 2 issues. And then I can never pronounce his last name. He did most of 3, and then Branko, I had been working with Broxton, and he had some personal issues he had to deal with, and I wanted to give him enough space, and there was stuff going on in his life that he really needs to deal with. And so I shelved the book for some time. And then when I started collaborating with Branko, it felt right. It felt like he was a really good fit for the book artistically. So, I reached out to Broxton. I was like, listen, I want to pick this back up again. And I have an artist that I really want to work with. He's great. And so that's how that just kind of evolved back into it. So, Branko's been doing every issue since 4. He did some of 3, but all the way through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He's working on 9 right now. He's halfway done with that.
You're going to come back with another campaign for 9 and 10, I would assume?
Yeah, I think because, to me, kickstarting an individual issue is a little bit, it's hard for me to justify that.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons why Spicy Pulp was 60. And there's going to be a book coming out in the beginning of this next year called Bleeding Pulp, which is going to be 54, 60 pages each. Because I really want to give people more stuff. And I know it takes me more time and there's a lot more moving parts, but I feel like it's more justifiable to say this is a big chunk of material you're going to get consistently. So Branko and I decided to do 2 issues at a time, which is roughly 56 pages of content per Kickstarter or more, because I feel like issue 12 is probably going to be maybe a double-sized issue with the amount of stuff I want to put into that. Okay. Which is nice because you can't really do that if you're doing that for Marvel or DC. You have to kind of compartmentalize or make sure you do a 6-issue structure with specific page numbers. And I really like that we can tell the story with as many pages as it needs.
100%. Here, I got the banner that you have for the Spicy Pulp page on your website that I'm uploading right now. Stand by. There it is. Hopefully. There it is, everybody.
Yeah.
So kind of a fun anthology that you do of a bunch of genres. And talk about Spicy Pulp for a second. You were kind enough to send me a couple issues.
Yeah, I'm doing fulfillment on the 6th issue right now, which sees the return of Lady Redbeard.
Cool.
And this is a Francisco Tomaselli cover, digitally painted, and it's got you can't really tell in here, but it's got a really nice, it's got a special kind of paper. I've been playing around with different paper types because I want these Kickstarters to be different for everyone. So like with Standstill, there's paper covers that are completely different from anything else that I do, that I worked with the printer on, and we discuss on the coloring, the weight of the paper and whatever. It's really interesting. It's nice. And with Spicy Pulp, which this is the 6th issue, and that one's gonna be done for a little while. I'm gonna put that aside for a bit and work on Bleeding Pulp going into the year. But it's been a real fun project. One of the things that I felt like towards the end of working for DC, I really wanted things to be more fun, and it wasn't. Superheroes weren't. Everything felt very serious. It felt like everything had an agenda, and everything was sort of moving in a direction that just wasn't so much fun to read. And so when I started working on Spicy Pulp, I started just kicking into that, my love of like 70s and 80s European and American, adult science fiction things, heavy metal, and epic comics, and I wanted to have fun with it too, in the sense that I loved Savage Sword of Conan, but I'd been watching Amazon Prime, and I came across, I think it was Deathstalker, and it's this really bad Italian barbarian movie that's so un-PC, it's almost laughable. And it gave me the idea for Dude Bro the Barbarian, and just to do a sort of adult-themed rom-com starring a Conan warlord type character. And those things are a lot of fun to have. Antonio Brandao was the artist on that, and he really loved John Buscema's work, so he gave it a John Buscema flavor. That's the kind of fun we have with that book.
In general, I love that you and Jimmy are leaning into the more violent, more sexy stuff, and it's like, yeah, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And again, like you said, we grew up on this stuff, heavy metal and epic and things like that. So it's like, no, I really think the last 20 years, obviously, I mean, it speaks for itself in terms of that it's a new age. And I think a lot of people that grew up on DC and Marvel and stuff and might remember the black and white stuff or Epic or some of the other things. They're ready for more adult fare. And that's great. And then again, they love it unabashedly. They're not ashamed anymore.
And I think there's something to be said for escapist comics. I think there's something to be said for things that don't, I'm not shooting for high art. I'm not shooting for, Eisners. I just want people to be entertained. We went through, a fun couple of years here. So like any kind of distraction from reality, I thought was, good for at least 15 minutes of your life just to catch your breath.
Absolutely, man. No, I so agree. And I suppose in a way, we got a dress rehearsal for some of this stuff when you guys were doing Jonah Hex. And I mean, here there's and sorry if it's a little blurry, but I wanted to grab a cover. Honestly, man, I love both runs, not only in Jonah Hex but also All Star Western. And but in Jonah Hex, it was so great for you guys to go and get as many different artists as you did. And in some cases, you'd put two stories in one issue, or a solo story in a single issue and stuff. And it was just a pleasure to read every month. I mean, it really was, and I was really glad to be one of the readers, and I'm glad that DiDio and DC saw the value of this. I mean, I'm sure maybe, I don't even know when in the run, or maybe it was from the start, that a Jonah Hex movie would come of it. I wish it was a better movie, as I'm sure you do, and I know Jimmy feels that way too.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, were there plans already for a movie, and did they just need someone to make a book to kind of feed into that? How did all that play out? Take me back to when you guys got greenlit for Jonah Hex.
You mean the series, or just the whole? You mean all the way back to 2005, leading into the launch in 2006?
Yeah,
It was one of those things where I think Dan and Jimmy were talking, and Dan was kind of like, "What do you want to do?" And Jimmy said Jonah Hex, and nobody was really doing it, or I think there was interest in it from another writer, but then the writer shifted over to doing their own thing at Vertigo. So he called me up and he said, we're going to do Jonah Hex. And I was like, okay. And I had, I didn't have an in-depth knowledge of the character. I didn't grow up reading Jonah Hex. I was aware of him. I had probably read one or two issues, but I knew the where he came from. I knew the base of inspiration that John had, and that Tony, what they built with that was definitely spaghetti westerns. It was definitely the 70s archetype, which I absolutely loved. So it was, and for me, it wasn't just Clint Eastwood movies. It wasn't just the Sergio Leone, Good, Bad, and the Ugly. It was like every trash western in Germany, and The Great Silence, and Eight for the Apocalypse, and all these other things. I was like, these are things that I really wish we could do. So let's just do that. And I believe Stephen Wacker said we were looking at, because we had just done like 12 issues of Hawkman, this big epic story.
Right.
And we just wandered back into, okay, we're going to tell a long yarn about Jonah Hex, and it was Stephen Wacker who's like, no, let's just do 2-issue stories. Let's do 1-issue stories. Let's triangle back to that. And I had like a panic attack because I was like, wait, this is like, suddenly it was like I was used to doing this. And then I was like, wait, you want an entire story in, 22, 24 pages. And it was the best thing that could have happened to me, creatively and just in general. I mean, that working on Jonah Hex was the pinnacle of what I thought comics were in terms of being on the other side of it. Because I recently wrote a short piece in my newsletter about how I had come into Marvel Knights, and I thought what they were doing at Marvel Knights was how you made comics, because all they did before that was read them, and dream like everyone else does before they get in the business and realize it's a business. And but I thought that was how you made comics. It was just kind of like you get it done, and everyone looks at everything, and you're hands-on with everything from start to finish. And then later on, I gradually started to learn that wasn't how it was. But by the time we got to Jonah Hex, essentially, I don't know whether, I didn't think it was going to last even a year. I didn't think we were going to get 12 issues out of it. So our general philosophy was just to write the crap out of it every issue we got, and we'd just be happy with whatever we had.
Sure.
And it reached a point where I think Wacker left at issue 6 or 7, because we had so many editors, I couldn't even line them up in chronological order at this point. But they just kept handing the book off, and because of the format of it, and because it was always on time or 6 months ahead of time, no one had to worry about it. So it was like the easiest book for an editor to work on. And so we just kept being left alone and given more and more leash. So with more and more leash, there was more and more artists. There was more and more risk taking and just saying, who do you want to work? We sit around and be like, who do we want to work with on this? Like, let's write a story for this person, that person. I remember when I said I wanted to write a story for Darwin, I was like, I want to write it just for you. And, we did that. I think Jimmy wrote one just for Eduardo Riso. And we just kept going back and forth with those things. And it was just wonderful. We would just get pages all the time. We would get told to stop writing scripts because we'd be too far ahead. It was just, and I think it was a pleasure because everyone who, I won't say everyone because I don't specifically remember if every single person, but almost everyone that came on to do art was so excited just to be doing that. And because they got to do almost whatever they want. I remember J.H. Williams. I'm like, you don't really art direct J.H. Williams. You just let J.H. Williams do his thing, and he adds all these nuances and pieces to things. And it was just a great, fun time to work on the book.
I hear you, man. And, at one of the first C2E2s, I got to do a video interview with Darwin about his Jonah Hex thing. And he was so jazzed about it and everything. And I was so angry because it was a videotape interview. It was in one of the skyboxes. Maybe it was New York. I think maybe it was New York Comic Con instead. And they like screwed up the videotape, so there's no record of it. And literally, that was the only. I mean, I had a lot of conversations with Darwin outside, hanging out after hours and stuff like that. That was our only interview, and it just bummed me out. I'm like, oh, and then we got obviously in recent years, I didn't know how sick he was until near the very end and stuff. And yeah, it's a deep regret because he was always incredibly kind to me. But also, God, like literally from the first time I met him, he told me about it's funny. I was talking to Sal Avenatti, and we were talking about Speakeasy Comics, and like Darwin was the first one was like, yeah, those guys are not good. Stay away from them, and here's why. And I'm like, all right. And I even remember meeting him when New Frontier was coming out, and it was when it was monthly, it was like in floppies, and he's like, I'm like, Darwin, this is amazing. He's like, yeah, but they kind of screwed me on the format. And I go, what do you mean? And he goes, well, I really wanted it to be in that Dark Knight Prestige format, and I wanted the price point to be affordable.
Right.
And he goes, this was the compromise that they kept the price point, but they made it into like, whatever it was, 48-page or 64-page floppy. And he was just so bummed. And I'm like, well, they're going to collect this, man. This is too beautiful. Don't worry. Right. So, but yeah, I mean, again, just like going into detail about his Jonah Hex story and so many other great artists that it was just, like you said, Jim, J.H. Williams, and I can't remember his name. Three names with a David. David, was it?
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Shame on me.
Yeah, I see his artwork in my mind.
Shame on us. All right, no worries. But I mean, again,
terrible.
Just this.
David Michael Beck.
Yes, it was David Michael Beck. Well done. Yes, I mean, and again, just these amazing artists that would come in and give you guys 20 pages or 22 pages, and it's like, it was such a great series, and it's like, God, I'm so glad it lasted. I mean, and nothing lasts forever. I'm glad you guys had a significant run, and then of course even subsequently, dovetailing in All-Star Western too.
Right. I mean, I had to look back recently. I didn't realize we had done 16 issues with Jordi Bernay.
Wow.
That's a lot. I mean, that should be its own thing. That should be its own prestige thing. But yeah, I mean, we worked with Tony before Tony passed.
Yes.
And
De Zuniga. Yeah, I have a De Zuniga Jonah Hex framed in my apartment here.
Oh, that's awesome.
And got it for a song, and I'm so glad that I got it and stuff. It's like, oh my God,
Yeah, it was. The book is very emotional, and then so many people that I worked with on that have passed too, and it's kind of like, I'm blessed and cursed at the same time. Just a lot of emotions, it was a great experience, and that carried over, like I was saying, into where I think you segued into that, things like Spicy Pulp and doing my own things my own way, because again, I just go out, I find artists I want to work with, and that's something that all came out of that experience.
I get it, man. No, absolutely. Do you have a good Darwin story that you could share?
I do. I mean, we have like funny, weird stories, because I use a pseudonym when I do lettering.
Okay.
And I use the name Benny Lava. because one night we were having a conversation, and I was trying to talk to Darwin Benihana, and I was saying, went to Benihana, and he's like, who? I'm like, Benihana. He's like, Benny Lava? Who's Benny Lava? And so we sat there and came up with this whole mythology for a character named Benny Lava, who was like a loan shark in Bollywood and did all these stuff. And like, so that was one of the things that we just, and he busted my chops because, the very first Hex story he did, my idea was like, I wanted Darwin's interpretation of like those old boys wilderness magazines, like Boy's Life, and I can't even remember what the names they are, but they all had a very specific look. They had like painted covers, and they were big magazines.
Oh yeah.
And that was kind of like, I wanted to do a story that was like that, but for adults. And of course he had to bust my chops because it was snowing. And he's like, it doesn't always snow in Canada. I was like, yeah, it does. Like, it's just snow, beer, hockey, and Mounties. It's all you have up there, And we would laugh about that, but
that was one of the distinct things about his issue. In fact, and that's what we talked about was that, it's like, you don't normally see like a Western comic book that takes place in the winter and everything. No, I loved it. I thought it was very distinct and everything. Also, man, I'm so glad you mentioned Marvel Knights because here I grabbed a couple covers to look at, and of course, Daughters of the Dragon, fantastic. Mm-hmm. Come on,
that's probably my favorite thing to do at Marvel, hands down. Because again, that was one of the things where they left us alone, and I was like, let's do a 1970s exploitation with these characters, and I still think it was a missed opportunity with the idea of bail bonds for villains. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's been used by other people and indie comics as well, but it just felt like such a fun take on the character. It probably would have made a fun animated series for sure.
Oh my god! And especially if you could do it a little PG-13 and everything,
and do it in like Carrie's style of like that really hyper fluid. It was very sexy artwork and without being gratuitous.
JD wants everyone to know he agrees Tony DeZuniga's art is great in black and white. I loved it. Yeah. Jordan Bernay's Torpedo is also great. Absolutely, man. I'm sure those are the reasons why Justin and Jimmy wanted to work with them. And certainly in the case of Jonah Hex, being the co-creator and everything. But yeah, I mean, Jordy, my God, everything Jordy Bernay does was just incredible. And then also here I have I know you did 2 arcs of Black Cat and Wolverine Claws, and this is part of the cover of Claws 2 and everything.
Yeah, with Joe Linsner.
Yeah, Joe Linsner cover, absolutely, man. Did he do the interiors or just the covers?
No, he did the interiors. Yeah,
I'd forgotten. Wow, that's great. Yeah. Wow. Again, I mean that's the thing, man. Sex and violence, as Jimmy says in his anthologies. And again, I'm glad you're doing Spicy Pulp and what's the other? And Bloody Pulp. Bloody Pulp.
Yeah, Bloody
now,
Pulp.
What's the difference between spicy and bloody? Violence rather than sex, or?
No, well, one's going to have a horror / creature feature kind of thing to it. So it's got 2 stories in it. One's going to be 6 issues, and then I'm going to have shorter, self-contained or 2-issue backup stories. So issue 1 is going to feature the first chapter of a book called I Eat Monsters, and that's going to have an attractive female lead who's very powerful and is uncovering a mystery about her own past. And then the backup feature to that is set in the 1930s, and it involves H.P. Lovecraft as one of the characters. And he summons this woman who's possessed by a witch, and the 2 of them have to stop, a Lovecraftian space god from taking over reality. And the artwork is very much, it's Miljenko Simic. I don't know if I pronounced that properly, so don't kill me. And he has a style that's very much like Bernay for this book. So it's going to be a very interesting, it's going to have this really gorgeous, I Eat Monsters looks very painted and animated. And then you have this sort of Jordy Bernay style, old school. I wanted that old school horror black and white, but then I made it color too, but I wanted it to be that style of book. And it's got sexiness and it's got monsters and it's got humor. But whereas Spicy Pulp was sort of fantasy sci-fi, you could throw Barbarella elements in there and like the heavy metal elements. This is more sexy horror, action oriented.
I understand. Shame on me, man. I don't know why I thought Jordy had passed. He's fine.
No, he's
fine.
Still with us. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank God he's still with us and everything. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's amazing. Are you? I mean, again, you mentioned some of these artists. I assume Eastern European in some cases.
Yeah,
Are you
well,
like?
Branko's from Serbia. Miljenko
Okay.
is from Croatia. The artist on I Eat Monsters is Rui Silveira and colorist Thiago Brandão, and they're both from Brazil.
Okay. And are you? And I mean, are you combing the non-states to kind of find these collaborators? How are you finding these people?
I just look for, like for instance, the first Lady Redbeard story. I really wanted a Milo Manara feel to it. I wanted a feel of like
Sure.
Gulliver's Travels when he did that book. The color palette, the sexiness, and the kind of fun, outrageous look to it.
Yeah.
And I found a Venezuelan artist who is living in Poland, but I
Wow.
just seen his art online, and that's Diego Guerrera. And I was like, "Do you want to do this?" And he said yes, and we just sort of worked it out, and that's kind of how it goes. I find sometimes I ask other people, and I say, you have a colorist or someone that you would like to see get more work, or let me see some of the stuff. Sometimes I find them online in Facebook groups or whatever, and it comes down to my eye and the material and me saying this person's perfect for it. Or sometimes I see people whose artwork I really like, but I just don't have the right story for them. And that goes back to Marvel Knights. That goes back to Jonah Hex. That goes back to the philosophy that Joe and Jimmy showed me right away, was that you pair the right people with the right project. And then I learned from Paul Jenkins that you write scripts that make them excited to be working on it. Because I want the artist to be happy and excited while they're working on the book. Because we all know what it's like to work on stuff that we can't stand. So
Totally.
I
Absolutely.
want that, especially in the comics.
Sure, man. Absolutely. When did you collaborate with Paul? Did Paul edit you, or how did
No, I was at Marvel Knights when Paul was doing Inhumans.
Sure.
So I would see all Paul's scripts, which I had never seen scripts like that before. I was looking at Kevin Smith scripts. I was looking at Christopher Priest scripts and Paul Jenkins scripts. And I was learning, basically I went from literally from reading comics to learning from these people in a hands-on. It was a lot to learn in a very short period of time. And I made some mistakes, and I probably made every mistake you can make and said all kinds of stupid stuff at Christmas parties. And but yeah, it was a great learning experience through that element of it.
So, and tell me, because truly, I came in at the tail end of Marvel Knights. That's kind of when I started reading again. Most of the 90s are kind of a blind spot for me because I just stopped reading for a while.
Sure.
And hearing that, hey, guess what? Kevin Smith is writing Daredevil, and it's almost as good as when Frank Miller was writing. And it's like, all right, you got my attention. And
Sure.
Paul doing the Inhumans and the stuff that Jimmy was doing, and obviously the stuff that Joe Q was doing and everything. So how did you become part of the Marvel Knights group?
I basically, I'm kind of like stupid fearless. Like I just do things. Like I want to do something and I just do it. And I don't really think too much about, it's like every time someone talks to me about stuff like that, if they want to get into comics or they want to write comics. And I said, there's a certain measure of just close your eyes and jump out of the plane, because it's never going to happen unless you take that step. So I had been, for years, I worked in restaurants all over the country, and I was getting really tired of it. And it's long hours, and it's holidays and weekends, and when everyone else is having fun, you're making sure that they're having fun. Anyway, so I started talking to Joe online, and just like randomly, back before everybody started closing down their social media presence, and we had message boards, and you could interact with people in a different way. It wasn't as toxic as it has become.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, so I was talking to Joe, and then somewhere in there, I know I went down to the city with a friend, and we sat with them, and Nelson DeCastro was there, Jimmy was there, Joe was there. There were some other people, maybe Garth was there briefly, and but at one point it was the Friday of Wizard World Chicago, and one of the guys at the restaurant didn't show up, and I was looking at another long weekend of doing this, covering for people, and I said, what, someone's got to cover for me for a change. I jumped in my truck and I drove to Chicago from New York. I found a hotel room, which was pretty far away from the convention center in a not so nice area. And I broke out what was called a phone book, and I went through the phone book and I called every hotel around the convention center until I got patched into Joe Quesada's room, and I was like, "Hey, I'm here. What are you guys doing?" And so
Cool.
he's like, "Why don't you just come and hang out with us?" And so that's what happened. I ended up going to the Blade party, which was at some club downtown Chicago. And I met Joe and his now wife, Nancy, and Jimmy. Briefly met Amanda in there too. It was a pretty wild period of time. And then about a month later, I think Joe or Jimmy called me up. I don't remember exactly. Sorry, guys. And they said, "Do you want to intern up here with us?" And I was like, I don't know what that entails, but yeah, of course, sure. I'll go work at Marvel for, whatever it is. And that's how I ended up being at Marvel Nights up there on the rooftop with those guys.
Hilarious. Absolutely. Yeah, they told me about that kind of rooftop office that they had and stuff like that. And yeah, that's so you were an associate editor. What did you do?
No, I was like the guy who makes copies and gets Ranch One for Joe. And I was just writing about this recently in my newsletter, and I realized I used to go to the Comics Code. I used to take blue lines and stuff and Xerox copies of the comics to the Comics Code to get the stamp of approval or the "you need to correct this panel" thing. So that was just like less than 4 years before Marvel said the hell with it and just went to their own rating system. But I was thinking about it. I think we went up into this. Some buildings in Manhattan have very narrow, so there's like this very narrow lobby and this little glass window, and you kind of hand it in through a slot to this woman who's sitting in there who probably hasn't read a comic in her life. And they give you a stack back and you take them back, and then we go through the notes. But yeah, I mean,
it was that kind of post office DMV sort of.
Yeah, it was a weird thing. As far as I'm remembering it, sometimes I romanticize things, but I don't think I'm romanticizing that very much. It went like there were people beyond this little glass partition that were apparently, making sure the children of America were safe from whatever.
Yeah, those boobs are too big. That explosion is too big.
Yeah, whatever started this 40-something years ago, and now it's obviously much longer. But
wow.
Yeah, so I remember that. That was fun.
That's hilarious, man. No, and isn't it crazy? Because I think it phased out like 15 years ago. So there's, probably a whole generation of readers right now that have heard of the Comics Code, but never really understood it, or were, their comic reading experience wasn't part of that. And as we were just talking off the air, I'm a couple of years older than you and stuff. And that little white postage stamp looking logo.
Yeah.
I love that people have made t-shirts of it in an ironic way. And I should get one eventually. Yeah, those are great. By the way, I don't know if you saw King Sport Cal is his name, was praising your Jack Daniels shirt there.
Oh, thank you.
So there, absolutely.
Hey, Tennessee, what's up? Give a shout out to Tennessee where he's at.
Absolutely, man. No, that's cool. That's excellent. Now you mentioned, and I'm so glad because I pulled up a cover. I loved your guys' Hawkman run, and especially this issue shows, isn't that Golden Eagle as the other Hawkman?
Yep. I
love that. And if people don't remember, Golden Eagle was kind of a Teen Titans West character and whatever. And I loved how you guys kind of made him kind of psychologically into a bad guy. And it's like, actually, I should be the new Hawkman. And by the way, I'll take your wife too while I'm at it.
Exactly.
Pretty great.
That was fun. I mean, we had a lot of opportunity to sort of dig through these old characters and try and put a different spin on them. And Jimmy and I tend to have a different spin than gets approved more, less than everyone else, I think. But I feel like you got to keep trying new stuff, even within the confines of what is essentially corporate IPs, but I was thinking recently, it's kind of funny how you have to there's a sense of you can have fun reinventing or sort of modernizing or whatever it is that you want to call it. But when you start, I was thinking about Power Girls continuity and the idea of essentially fourth wall accepting reality as fantasy and fantasy as reality. Instead of just letting the character be the character, trying to find a way to justify and retcon every stumbling mistake or fumble that happened along the way. It's such a comics thing that that was one of the things that started me down a path where I was like, this really isn't fun anymore, because you're not really being creative. You're just trying to shoehorn other people's stuff into some kind of understandable narrative moving forward. Instead of it just being plain and simple. Here's the character does this. If you love this character, this is why, but it's instead of like, trying to use like the multiverse stuff makes me crazy. So, it just takes the specialness out of everything for me. And I know that probably makes some people crazy, me saying that, but it is what it is.
I just want good stories, man. I mean, that's fine. And and also I want, I wasn't a big fan of when the New 52 happened. And on the one hand, they took away the World War II aspect of the Justice Society, right. And they kind of rebooted them as new characters. And it's like, no, the original designs, and again, no disrespect to Nicola and for her designs, Nicola Scott, because she's
wonderful too.
I'm so with you, man. Literally, like, I'm so glad that we're a good acquaintances, if not friends, and I think we're friends, but I wouldn't presume that without her going, yeah, we are, relax.
Sure.
But anyway, that said, no, but yeah, I just kind of like that. And again, another great run. You guys saw on Power Girl, hell yeah. And Amanda's art, I mean, it was so great. I loved you guys taking Vartox. And
yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Hilarious, man.
Again, finding those like 70s characters. And there's a charm to them that gets kind of lost, where they reach a period where they're really hokey, and then there's a period, I think, where there's merit to their hokiness. It comes back around.
Absolutely. Now, did you work with Amanda and Jim on Harley Quinn at all, or no? Is that purely them?
That was largely them, except we did do a mini series with Power Girl and Harley and Vartox. I think that was the last thing I worked on for DC.
Okay.
In 2015. I think it was.
That's cool.
So that was a fun sort of ride, the kind of stuff that, we were getting less and less opportunity to do. And I'm glad that Jimmy and Amanda got to do Harley Quinn their way. And obviously it was very successful and did a lot for them and the character. So
would you agree? I never got them to admit it, but Jimmy would smile at me when I'd say it. And I'm like, this is your Will Elder, Little Annie Fanny, basically. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's like there were characters in there that I had known were in his head. Like Cyborg has been around for a while. We used to, he used to make jokes, and I, make jokes back at him about it. But yeah, I mean, it was fun seeing him being able to exercise those characters into the real world. And Amanda, of course. I mean, Amanda's like the secret weapon. You have Amanda, and Amanda makes everything so much better. And
100%, man. I know, and she is so. I love her. She, as we all do, man. She's like girl next door, adorable, and just so coolly one of the guys. And I mean, and forgive me, everybody. I don't mean to. I'm sure that may be misogynistic, and while I'm trying to make a compliment, but I mean that in the best way. That like Amanda's just cool, and it just rides with everything. And I've noticed that in my solo conversations with her, and both of them. They were the last time C2E2 happened back in 2019. They had a panel, and I'm like, Jimmy doesn't need a moderator. Jimmy can moderate his own panel. And I talked to him. He's like, no, we really want you to do it.
No.
And Amanda's like, oh, we're so glad you're doing this. And I'm like, oh, that's really sweet. You guys are amazing. and yeah, man. And that's why truly when the Paper Films panel happened in August at Terrificon, I'm like, great. Finally, I get to sit down with Justin and talk to him for a bit. So this is truly, I'm really glad to get to know you and talk more about your stuff, man. Absolutely. Here, another classic thing that you did, and I forgot about this, right? Lone Ranger. Did you?
Yeah, Lone Ranger miniseries. Me being me, I made it all about how he's a virgin. So there's that wholesome character thing in there. I thought it would be interesting to write a character who was so wholesome that when confronted with those elements, how did he deal with them without, being silly instead of, I liked that aspect of that, when that was my angle on it. Because I feel like we'd seen so much of the same kind of thing, and you can do classic Western and you can do classic Lone Ranger, but I was trying to find something that hasn't really been explored all that much, at least to my knowledge. Maybe it has, but his wholesomeness is interesting to me.
I love that. And I mean, I always say I got to meet Buster Crabbe and Clayton Moore.
Oh, nice.
When I was a kid. And I have no doubt that that's why I'm still so into this stuff, because it's like All right, I met Flash Gordon. All right,
Right.
I met the Lone Ranger. This is amazing. And you ever hear those Jay Thomas Lone Ranger stories that he used to tell on Letterman?
No, I haven't.
Quite the opposite of the virtuous virgin.
I'm sure, right?
Yeah,
Well, it's like
Claymore got around. So
when people talk about Burt Ward and
Adam
like,
West.
yeah.
Yeah.
When I hear those stories off the side, I'm like, wait a minute, what? Like I'm in my mind, I equate them to this coming home from school and watching them act silly.
Oh, 100%. You know, Robert Vaughn. I used to work at a sports radio station for a long time, and one of our big hosts was a massive. You know, he's like 10 years older than me, something like that, and grew up on all that stuff when he was in the 60s of Batman and Man from Uncle and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and was fearless in terms of in almost a morning zoo sort of way, like asking guys. And he had Robert Vaughn on. Robert Vaughn's such a classy dude,
Right.
and he's like, come on, early 60s, you're Napoleon Solo. Tell me you didn't have, you know, every starlet was at your beck and call. And it was so great. Robert Vaughn's just like, well, I'm not someone that speaks of, you know, and tells stories out of school, but I will not deny being a young man and having a popular television show in the 60s certainly helped my social agenda. And it's like, but we know that means. Hey,
I would watch that. I would watch that as a show on HBO Max or Apple TV or whatever. I mean, like set in the 60s with those characters and those people, that'd be great.
Oh God, yes, I know. I feel that. I really wish, I mean, especially now that No Time to Die kind of put a button on Daniel Craig's James Bond thing. I would, if I were Lord God of James Bond, I'd be like, all right, we're setting all this stuff in the 60s and really totally doing Cold War stories. Because it's Matt Wagner and I had this discussion, and I don't know how you feel about this, because in fact, you and Jimmy found a way to take Jonah Hex and put him in the modern day. And I love that about All-Star Western. I thought it was really, really interesting. And some of those fantastic scenes of Jonah at Arkham Asylum and Bruce Wayne visiting him. And it's like right away before he even introduces himself, it's like, you're a Wayne. And he's like, and he goes, you smell like a Wayne. And it's just like, that is so great. And it was so great, much like in the 80s when Keith Giffen through Jonah Hex in the 30th century and had him with ray guns and stuff. It's like Jonah's like, all right, this is the lay of the land. Fine, I got it, no problem. And it's just so down to earth and peace that it's like, yeah, whatever, guns are guns. I got this. So yeah, I don't know how you. I'm sorry, say something. I'm
just saying it's hard to rattle him regardless of whatever. Yeah, he says the same shitty outlook on everything, so it's like it doesn't matter where I am. People are still the same.
Absolutely, man. So I don't know if you feel like a lot of these characters. I had this discussion with Matt Wagner that Matt's like, you know, they obviously work best in the era in which they were created, and he's like, you know, Batman really does work best in that late 30s motif, that era of like the Shadow and things, the pulp era, and you know, and he said like Zorro. He goes, and I remember this too. They tried to do a modern day Zorro where they stuck him on a motorcycle, and it's like, no. How about no? You know, and I don't know how you feel about how, you know, these characters when they're created compared to when they try to modernize them and stuff. You know, that's a tightrope, but I don't know how you feel about that.
I think it's so rare when they do it right. I think it's hard to make that work. I mean, you can do it with things that are science fiction because you can just keep moving the bar forward and just change the technology and stuff. But when, I mean, my joke about Batman is he would get found out in like no time at all between the internet, the IRS. I mean, there's just no way of hiding all that stuff. You know, you would have to go the other way. You would have to go and use all that technology the way Iron Man would use it.
Yes.
So it doesn't really, you know, and as we change as a society, your moral compass and your justification for things, they go from, you know, I mean, they've been edging at him being crazy for some time now. So like, I don't know. I do think that it would be fun if you left some of those characters in that time period. And I understand the desire to move it forward and that you have a serious issue with bankable material that you have to keep using because it's, you know, there's an audience there, you know, there's a certain amount of money you're going to make back on your investment. But I think it gets kind of tiring for the audiences but yeah, I mean, that's a huge discussion. That's how much cinema has changed, how much the landscape of television has changed, how how, all those things are just different now. It's like I was watching someone reviewing Dune, and they were like, oh, and then they have like this Jedi mind trick thing that they do. And I'm just like, okay, well, I get it. It's new to you, so that's fine. You don't realize you're going
right where
on things.
What Lucas's inspiration was with Frank Herbert, or however you say his name,
Right.
The Dune. Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, you're right. It's like Attack of the Clones has a lot of John Carter in it, and
Yep.
people don't realize when John Carter came out that actually, no, this is the original stuff. So yeah,
and I think Denny does a really good job of pointing out even more emphatically the things that Lucas capitalized on, because it's the stuff that Denny loved before anything else. I mean, Lucas made Star Wars, and it's like Dune for kids in a lot of ways.
absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, what are they going to do? I would love to see James Bond period piece movies, but then people start to age out of the understanding of the time. They don't know the Cold War, so then you have to figure out ways to make some kind of correlation, between the modern problems we're facing. At which point, all these things are going to become moot because we'll all be fighting each other with our phones. So it's not very exciting. Like the hero's here, he has an Apple iPhone, and he just hacked the subnet in China.
I always say that as much as I love the fact that we all got the back computer in our breast pocket now, I was convinced, Justin, that especially growing up watching shows and movies from the 60s and 70s, I thought for sure by the time I was 50, I would have my own jetpack and I would literally be flying to work. I thought for certain that was going to happen.
Right.
Because we were so close, and it's like, well, they're there. Isn't this the way cars were 100 years prior? I'm like, come on, we're going to get there in my lifetime. Well, I'll have jetpacks. No. But we have the supercomputers.
I just think people have enough problems on the ground. Can you imagine if people start flying around the air? I'm like, people can't drive on streets. Now you're going to have them all up there and falling onto everyone.
That's true.
The car is going to have to be an airbag once it starts to descend, so it bounces off people and doesn't murder them. But yeah, I can't imagine like the irresponsibility of people in a supermarket can't not crash their cars into each other because they're looking like this. You just see people flying into each other with those jetpacks.
You are not wrong. Absolutely. That's awesome, man. Very, very funny. Well, everybody, Standstill, issue 7 and 8. The Kickstarter campaign, again, has about 10 days left as of this recording. So if you're watching it now, you got 10 days. I'm going to put the audio out tomorrow, so it'll be 9. But plenty of time to jump on.
Yep.
Catch up.
Get all 8 in one form or another. There's a trade of 6, and then there's the 8, and then we get specialty covers if that's your thing. And and it's affordable.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, man. And I'm really glad you're doing it. And I'm excited for the next edition of Spicy Pulp. Come back. We'll talk more.
Okay.
Talk about GI Zombie and some of the other great, things that you guys made back in the day, but also the new ideas as well from writer Justin Gray. So, dude, thank you. This is great.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Here, I'm putting this up, and I'll put it in the audio link as well, and actually I'll put it in the description for the YouTube. But is there a more basic way for people to hit the campaign? I mean, go to your website or something? Is there a link right there?
No, I mean, if you just go to Kickstarter and search Standstill, it'll come up, or search my name and everything. I think this is the 17th Kickstarter I run.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it's working. I'm really glad it's working. So.
And this is the third Standstill that is a Projects We Love that they gave at the Projects We Love banner. So
congratulations! It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Very cool. Well done, Justin. Excellent, man. And everybody watching, thanks a lot. I want to remind everybody, if you don't mind hearing the commercial here. First of all, tonight, I'm talking to Jeffrey Brown about Batman and Robin and Howard, which looks hilarious. And, of course, all of his great Star Wars books that he's done, Vader's Little Princess, and I forget the one about Luke. But they're always great one-panel cartoons that Jeffrey has done over the years. So that's coming up tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern. Tomorrow I'm going to be really busy. I'm helping Bill Cox with a Comic Art Fans online art show. And, I'm going to be talking to Dave Marquez and Bendis about their collaborations, and Alex Saviuk about his runs on Spider-Man, both during the 90s, but also the Spider-Man Daily comic strip and Sunday comic strip, and he'll have original comic strips for sale. Mike Norton is going to be there. Jamal Igle is going to be there. Ryan Dunleavy and Fred Van Lente are talking about their documentary comics. It's going to be very busy on Saturday and Sunday, this great art show. I'll talk more about it tonight. But
say hi to Jamal for me.
I absolutely will. No, that's awesome, man. And so busy Word Balloon Live weekend.